Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Hey there, welcome back to the TalentGrow Show. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist, and this is episode 33 with my guest, Bill Treasurer. Bill Treasurer is a person who started his career with a pretty unusual kind of job. You can listen to find out what it was, but he is now well known as a speaker, author, and consultant, especially around the topic of courageous leadership. And so Bill shares some common leadership mistakes and how he can help move people to become more courageous. We get on to a discussion a little bit about being afraid of fear and being congruent and this tension between being yourself and faking it till you make it. It's coincidentally the topic of my most recent blog post. It was released last week if you're listening to this show as it's released. And I hope that you'll check that out as well. It's over on the TalentGrow blog page. It's talentgrow.com/blog/be-yourself. Bill and I talk about this tension and he gives some pretty sage advice about it. Bill's also, I'm pretty sure, the first guest to sing on the show. So he sings a cute little children's song as part of a story he tells about a lesson that he learned from his kids. I hope that you will enjoy that one. And of course, we always end with actionable advice, and this show is no different. So take a listen and go over to the show notes page to see all the links and the resources, and of course, to leave comments about what you're taking to heart from this episode or how you have implemented the advice, or any relevant stories that you have to share about any of the things that we discussed on it. And of course, if there's any comments you have about what you'd like to hear more about in the future, that is all great fodder for comments on the talentgrow.com/podcast/episode 33 page, because that's where the discussion can happen. Anyway, are you ready to listen to Bill Treasurer? Here we go, episode 33. I am so glad to be back with my friend, speaker, author, consultant, and CEO of Giant Leap Consulting, Bill Treasurer. Bill, welcome to the TalentGrow Show.
Halelly, I'm so happy to be here and looking forward to our time together.
Me too, and I'm so looking forward to sharing some of your wisdom with the listeners. Before we start, I always like to give people a little bit of a quick snippet into how you made it to this point and where you started. So could you just give us a very fast, brief overview of your journey?
Sure. I have a courage building company called Giant Leap Consulting, and we've been in business now this is our 14th year. Prior to coming to Giant Leap Consulting, I worked with a company called Accenture, one of the world's largest management consulting companies. Before that, I was a vice president of a company called Executive Adventure, which does outdoor experiential team building. Before that, a little company called High Performing Systems. And way, way back in my career, I started out as a professional high diver, diving from heights that scaled to over 100 feet into small pools as a member of the U.S. high diving team.
Which, of course, no podcast guest has ever told me that that's what they did at the beginning of their career. I remember when I first met you, you were a keynoter at a conference that I believe at the time I was really just attending that conference. Later on, I spoke at that conference, and later on, I was the chair of organizing that conference for chapter leaders of our professional association and back in the DC area. And that blew my mind. You know, your story about starting as a high diver. It is just such an unusual story. And of course, it ties into your interest in courage, and most of your career has centered around that topic. And of course, maybe we'll touch on that a little bit today. One of the most frustrating things about my podcast is that I want to talk for 3 hours, not 30 minutes. But most people don't have that much time to sit there and listen to us. So you've published how many books by now?
So I'm working on my fourth book. The fourth book comes out in the January timeframe, but I'm also the author of an off-the-shelf facilitator training program, which is kind of like bigger than a book. So I don't know whether to include it when I tell people that I've written 4 books and it becomes the 5th one, or not include it because it actually, was bigger than a book. So 4 official books and this big, large off-the-shelf facilitator training program called Courageous Leadership.
Wow. Yeah, that's it sounds like a lot of work. So the most recent published book you have was one that I reviewed on my blog. It's the second edition of Leaders Open Doors. And it's a really nice book. I recommend it to people because it's a short read. It's not like one of those things you can use to hold down your house in a tornado. And in that book, you say that there is this thing called the complexification of leadership, which that word is an oxymoron in and of itself since it's so difficult to say. And you say that we should simplify leadership and follow 4 key skills to instill optimism instead of fear in the hearts of people. And those skills you say are to know your people, match their development opportunities to their development needs, have a clear picture of the desired results you want from these opportunities, and to provide them ongoing support. This, I think, is very, very right. And I'm so glad that you say that the real growth happens in the discomfort zone, which of course is a topic that we've covered many times on this podcast. So you yourself as a leader, as a developer of leaders, as an author about leadership, you see a lot of mistakes, and you probably have made many mistakes, because all leaders do in the discomfort zone. What do you think are 1 or 2 of the most common leadership mistakes that you've seen that you can help fix?
I think that one of the most common mistakes is not answering the holy question. I had somebody who once told me that, Bill, these are the 4 most important words you'll ever learn in the English language. He called it the holy question. What do you want? I think a lot of people sort of open up the day and open up the door and sort of let their life run themselves. And unless you can answer with specificity and with a great deal of clarity what it is that you want, it's hard for other people to help you get what you want because you don't know what it is. So I think the first order of business in deciding on how to be more courageous, how to be a better leader, is to decide what it is that you want. And then you can ask yourself, so courage for the sake of what? If that's what I want, how do I move myself forward and who are the people I need to interact with to get me closer to getting what I want? So I think that that's one of the mistakes people make, is they sort of just exist. They react to the day. They think that their life's just going to unfold for them without having any intentionality. It kind of goes down to the simple idea of making sure you've got a big goal in front of you, and knowing what you want becomes that goal.
I love that. So that your life doesn't happen to you, you happen to it in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, very good. So it sounds like maybe just first thinking about what your goal is and maybe even writing it down or telling other people about it probably would help you with that.
Definitely. And along the lines of that too, another sort, I like questions. I like good questions that people can help resolve and answer for themselves. And you have to grapple with the question. In fact, you may not be able to answer what do you want. It might take you 6 months to arm wrestle that question down to the ground. But once you find out with specificity and then you have clarity, now you know which way to go. Another really good question to ask yourself is, where am I playing it too safe? Where am I playing it too safe in my life or in my career? And maybe I'm the only one who knows it, and I'm hiding out from myself. But how do I get off this platform of safety so that I can move into that discomfort zone, whatever it may be? So it really starts to point you in the direction of the next right, courageous move for yourself is to pinpoint again, what is that aspect of myself? What is that capability that I've been avoiding? Where am I playing it too safe? Because that's going to tell me the next courageous move that I should make.
So we've mentioned the word courage and courageous several times. Why don't we take a second to hear what is your definition of that?
Yeah, and so, for perspective, this whole idea of courage and courage building, in fact, it's one of my websites is couragebuilding.com, and that's because I consider myself a courage builder. Like you mentioned that I'm the CEO of my company, Giant Leap Consulting, and CEO to me stands for Chief Encouragement Officer. And it came about because I had a coach who held me accountable to my own potential and helped me find my courage. Yes, I was a high diver, but I have a profound fear of heights. And I had a coach who would put me on a hydraulic lift diving board. See, I was just a 1 meter specialist diving board. guy. I was on the low board, just like you or anybody else. But in order to get a scholarship for college, you've got to be able to get a high board list of dives. And I had a coach who helped me do that literally by moving me into discomfort by using a hydraulic lift diving board that he can move from 1 meter to 1.5 meter to 2 meter to eventually to 3 meter. And it took like almost a year to get that full list of dives that way. So it gave me my whole life. Now I help people get off of whatever metaphorical high dive platforms that they're sitting on, and I become the coach helping them take whatever high dive, because all of us are called to take high dives personally and professionally. My definition of courage is acting on what is right despite being afraid or uncomfortable when facing situations of uncertainty or opportunity. So the first order of business is to act on the right thing. Now, there's even books on this idea of moral leadership. I can't tell you, Halelly, what the morality is. But I can tell you, you ought to bring your own morals to the equation. Courage can be used and applied in ways that are productive or unproductive. They can be used towards malevolent needs or benevolent needs. A person who steals a car at 17 years old is being courageous.
Yeah.
But they're doing it in the wrong way. Just as leaders can be, leadership itself, it's very potent, but it's also very neutral. You can be a leader who does things for good, or you can be a leader who does things for bad. Hitler was a leader. He's not a good leader. He's a malevolent leader. He's an evil leader, but he was a leader. Mm-hmm. A person can be courageous towards good things or towards bad things. So bring morality to the courage. The first sentence that I always use is acting on what is right. Mm-hmm. Again, despite being afraid or uncomfortable when facing situations of uncertainty or opportunity.
Yeah. And we're so afraid of fear. It's like we're allergic to it, right? Like we run away the minute we feel it. So often that instinct, that fight or flight instinct just kicks in and we avoid the situation.
Yeah, it's the 4-letter F word, right? Fear is, gets in it can absolutely inhibit our ability and willingness to take risks. And yet, it's partly ingrained in us because we learn it as little kids. Our parents tell us, don't talk to strangers, don't play with matches, don't cross the road without looking both ways. Hey, we learn all the don'ts, and you got to learn them, right? But you still have to talk to strangers. You still have to learn how to use matches. You still have to cross that road. So you got to learn the do's too, but we place this overemphasis on don'ts. And I'll give you another example. We're taught at a young age, sometimes even with our religious traditions, respect your adults, right? Like honor your mother and your father. And I'm not saying to not honor them, but at some point in your progression as a leader, you have to become your own authority, and that might mean standing up to other authority. And it takes a tremendous amount of courage to do so. But if you're just going to be a puppet to your past and be a domesticated little boy or girl who never grew up, then it's hard for you to experience your courage. So sometimes, having courage means going against so many of the lessons we learned as little kids to be, in order to be not troublesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and taking stance, even when it's not popular, or even when you worry that other people won't agree with you. That's scary for people. You have a lot of great resources available on your website, and of course we're going to link to it in the show notes so people can go and check them out. One of them, I watched several of your video blogs. Do you call them vlogs?
Yeah, sure. I'm fine with vlogs.
Yeah,
sure.
That's what I call mine. It's such a weird word to say. So in one of them, you told a very sweet story about your trip to Spain with your kids. But the message in that story was very much about how people have a gap between their business self and their home self, or their non-business self, that we show up often very differently. And I see this all the time in my work. When people ask me, well, what do you mean? Do you mean that, am I like this at work, or am I like this at home because I'm different? And you were making the point that we should close the gap, and that we should have sort of one self that shows up consistently everywhere. I'd love to hear more about that, because I think that there's tons of fear associated with that, because there's a really big risk to showing your home self at work, and people I think people are very worried about that. I'd love to hear more about what you think is their big risk. What do you think is their big worry around that? And why do you think that they should not separate those?
Well, I'll share the story too because it's a quick story, and I think it is kind of cute.
Yeah.
We were in Spain, and I heard my little son. He was singing the song. He was singing "Down in the Bubbly Boo." He'd go, "Down in the Bubbly Boo, underwater, down in the Bubbly Boo," and it sort of became our little theme song for part of the trip. But then we'd mix it up. My other son would say, "Do it as an old lady," and you go, "Down in the bubbly boo, underwater," and then somebody would say, "Do it as a Russian czar, down in the bubbly boo, underwater," and then one of my sons says, "Do it as Dad, the business person." And I was like, "What? Dad, the business person?" I didn't even know they had a construct of me as the business person. I thought they just, experienced me as Dad. So my little son, he turns his head and puts on a very serious face, and he goes, "Down in the bubbly boo, underwater." And I was like, oh, man, on the one hand, it was funny. On the other hand, there was a message in there. And the message was that, Dad, who you are at the dinner table with us at night, is really different than Dad we see on the phone or hear you talking to other business people. And this struggle for congruency, I think a lot of people experience, and certainly I have experienced it. This feeling like I've got to be somebody at work who says the same buzzwords and speaks the same lingo as everybody else. And after a while, it can be a little fakey, right? Like we get a little phony with our language, well, the strategic value add proposition is to make sure that we have the right share of wallet from our consumers. And we don't even talk like people anymore. And so I think that congruency, I recognize there will always be some gap and maybe even some appropriateness for that gap. But the more that you can be the person in real life that you are and in your work life, the less exhausting it's going to be, because the more you're having to separate those two identities and the greater that the separation is, the more effort it takes, I think. So I think that ultimately to be at peace with yourself, to be able to sort of say, this is who I am, is, first of all, I think it's for yourself. Like I say, it's centering, and it puts you at peace. But I think it also gives you strength because it shows that you're comfortable in your own skin. You're not squirrely in your own skin.
I'd like to bring up something. I know that you've been thinking about it. I struggle with this a little bit in terms of advice. I mean, I don't struggle because I know what the advice is, but it seems counterintuitive to me. But I know you recently wrote an article about faking it. And this idea that when you're learning new skills, or when you're trying to go into the discomfort zone, sometimes you have to act as if first, and then you kind of grow into it. And I think that most people, when we talk about this whole be congruent, and then we tell them that they should try something on for size even when it doesn't feel natural, like don't just be yourself. Like let's say, okay, my knee-jerk reaction, my most shoes-off self reaction would be to curse at you or to yell at you or, whatever. And I'm working on being a more emotionally intelligent leader, or I'm working on not being a jerk at work or something like this, or controlling myself. So I need to control my natural reaction and be someone else first so that I can be respectful, whatever it is that I'm working on. So I think that there's this weird tension between telling people just be yourself and telling people, no, be this other person until you grow into being that.
Yeah, I think that there is a tension around that. I think that this idea of act as if or fake it till you make it, I'll tell you where it's really popular, Halelly, is in 12-step programs. Like, for people that are having to give something up that they have been habitual with, they may not know what it's like to be a sober person for the first time in their life. They may not know what it's like to not be codependent for the first time in their life. And because they don't know what it's like, and they see other people saying that they've got it, but they don't yet have it, they have to kind of fake it each day until they're able to acquire it, because it's such a foreign experience. I think what matters most is, are you true? Are you being true to yourself? Are you being true to others? Even if you're having to adopt a identity that is outside of who you are for this moment. And by the way, in the service of getting better skills, right, or in the service of getting something different and better because of it, then I think that then it's worth it. It seems to me to act as if you're putting it in, in the case of the person in a 12-step program, they're having to fake it till they make it to be better. They're having to fake it to be a better person, a more whole person, a more complete person, a more centered and grounded person, but it's still a fraudulent identity for a little while until they actually become that sober person or that, non-codependent person.
So maybe earlier you were saying that you lead with your morals or you lead with your values. So maybe if you're doing something in service of those values, that you believe that the ends justify the means and the means help you reach that end, that is a good end, a moral end, then maybe then that's okay.
Yeah, and I mean, this conversation is interesting to me, and it's helpful to me, actually. I think that, what it might be is, so for example, your example of maybe there's a person who's got a lot of great intelligence from an intellectual standpoint, and they tend to speak really bluntly, like you were talking about before, in terms of the acquisition of emotional intelligence. For that truth teller, for that honest, maybe blunt force object, when they are being honest, their value is honesty. So maybe what they're having to do is acquire a new value too. It doesn't mean that they can't still have honesty, but they're also now having a new value in terms of the treatment of people. And because they're acquiring it for their first time and they don't yet have that skill, and again, it's in the service of making them better and more complete and whole, for a little while they have to be, it may feel like they're faking being nice, or they're faking listening, or they're faking attending to the needs of somebody else, when they're so used to being honest all the time, and they feel that it's a little dishonest to be that person. But ultimately, it's through the practice and the discomfort of acquiring the, of being a little bit fraudulent for a little while until you can actually acquire it and make yourself more complete with the new value.
This is why there is a million books on leadership. It's so damn complex. You want us to simplify, but it's just, it's so yeah, do this, but not this, and then this.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, right? Easy. Just follow me. So is there any other kind of counterintuitive advice that you give, something that you believe strongly to be true that you think most other people say the opposite of?
Yeah, I guess maybe I would say, I say it maybe in a different way. I say that a leader's job is to make people uncomfortable. And some people are like, they find that off-putting, right? But my work. I am not a fear stoker. I'm not about stoking fear, because I can tell you there's a lot of research to back up how debilitating it can be on performance. Right. But what I do mean is that a leader has to nudge you into discomfort to promote your own growth and to keep you from being complacent. So that's one thing I would say, that, maybe at least the way that I say it is different, is that, your job as a leader is to make people uncomfortable. And that starts too with yourself as a leader. You've got to be occasionally doing things that give you sweaty palms to show that you're still growing and challenging yourself and being willing to experience discomfort and experience your courage at the same time too. Yeah.
So you're working on a new book.
I am.
And it has a naughty title.
It
and
does.
If that's what's new and exciting, or is there something else new and exciting that's on your horizon that's got your attention these days?
No, that's really the new and exciting thing. The funny thing is, my first book was about risk-taking. My second book was along that same line, was about courage. My third book was really about opportunity and simplicity, with Leaders Go to Leaders Open Doors. I think my new book is really about the importance of what I call transformative humiliation, that it's really about confidence and humility, but we gain humility through authentically humiliating experiences. So the new book's kind of about how do you not just recover from failure, but how do you integrate the lessons after you've failed. So it's called A Leadership Kick in the Ass. And the idea is that there are some situations that are just so perplexing and so crushing that they cause us to question everything that we've thought about in terms of our leadership, and everything that we've become up until this point gets dismantled. And how we reconfigure ourselves on the backside of that will make the big difference on whether we get to be a fully expressed leader or a compromised leader. So it's called The Leadership Kick in the Ass, and I'm right in the thick of it right now. I'm actually in the fourth version of the manuscript.
Wow. That's exciting. And I know you're collecting a lot of real life stories from people. So I look forward to when it comes out so I can read it, and maybe you can come back on the show and we can talk about that more then, huh?
I would love to. I would love to. The cool thing is, so far, it's gotten a lot of good endorsements, including from Ken Blanchard and Marshall Goldsmith. So that's pretty good company to be in.
Yes, it is. Awesome. All right. Well, before we tell people how to keep in touch with you so that they can be in the know about what's going on with you and all the good stuff that you put out there, I always like to make sure that we leave listeners with something really specific that they can do today, tomorrow, this week, to upgrade their own leadership skills. So what's one specific action that you recommend?
Well, I definitely think, answer that question, the holy question, what it is that you want. And I also think that ask yourself what's better. And this one comes from my friend Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner, co-authors of The Leadership Challenge. They also wrote a really new book, and it's great, by the way. It's called Learning Leadership. They say that good leaders constantly ask the question, what's better? And I think that that's a good question to constantly be asking ourselves. To not be satisfied with good enough or how the world is today. Let's constantly be saying, how can we make it better tomorrow?
So what's a practice that people can incorporate with something like that? I mean, do they just keep asking themselves that incessantly, or is there a particular way that you think works best for how to incorporate that into their practice?
I don't know. I guess I would say sometimes it's the nitty-gritty small stuff. So for example, the other night, I'm a dad. I've got two 12-year-olds at home and a 9-year-old. So I've got two boys and a girl. And I bought a baseball mitt with my sons so I could throw the ball with them. My daughter has cerebral palsy, so it's not quite as easy for her to throw the ball. So I got a baseball mitt. Great. And I'm out there playing with the boys. What's better? Well, the mitt could be better. So I got oil, and I oiled the mitt, and I taught the boys how to oil the mitt, and I wrapped the mitt up for a few days with a ball inside of it. And now, our mitts are nice and moist, and they're floppy, and they're fun to play with. So it's just taking what you're doing already and saying, what's a small thing that I can do to improve on this? And I think the smaller, the more nitty-gritty, the better. And I find it in writing too, right? Like I'll write a sentence and I'll think, okay, that sentence works. But I wonder, is there just one word in that sentence that I can change that gives it a little bit more pop or will cause it to resonate more? So I think go small instead of go big when it comes to looking for what's better.
Great. Good. Thank you for those examples. I think that really helps. So, well, we're coming up on time here, and I know that people are going to want to stay in touch with you and to learn more from you. I will link to everything you mentioned in the show notes. How can people stay in touch with you and all the good stuff you produce?
Sure. Well, the easiest thing is just sort of Google me, right? Like Bill, if you go Bill Treasurer, you'll definitely find stuff. But the more specific places, couragebuilding.com, leadersopendoors.com, billtreasurer.com. Those would be the best places to get me.
Wow, you have a lot of websites.
I do.
Cool. Very good. Well, listen, Bill, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with our listeners, and I hope that people take your advice and also stay in touch with you. And until the next time, make today great. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'd love to hear what you thought, as I said, in the comments on the show notes page, which is, of course, where all of the links are to everything that we mentioned on this show, including my recent blog post that happens to be on a very similar topic. This idea of, should you be yourself, or should you fake it till you make it, or is there some in-between solution? So go over there and check that out. And I have a challenge for you. Would you please send a link to this episode, or maybe just to the show in general, to two people? If every listener sends the link to two people to help them also enjoy the content that I put out freely, then that means that I can triple my listening audience. So it's the same amount of work that I do, but it can have triple the impact. And this is very appealing to me, and I hope that you'll help me out. If every person just does that, just send it to two people that you know that you think could enjoy this or would benefit from it, you would help me so much, and it would take 2 seconds of your time. Would you do it, please? I thank you. Well, I'm Halelly Azulay, and I'm your leadership development strategist here on the Talent Grow Show. And until the next time, I hope that you'll make today great.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Grow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.